Hi, and welcome to Beyond Barriers. Today on Beyond Barriers, we have Figen Murray. She is from the UK, for all of you here in the US. She actually had a son that was in the Manchester bombing in 2017 and now works as an advocate for more security in public spaces and stuff like that. And actually, what I will let Figen take it from there and let her tell us a little bit about herself and why she does what she does now. Hi, Figen.
Hi. I was working for about 23 years as a psychotherapist and life coach in my private practice. And life was good. My children were all sort of growing up and becoming more independent. I was looking forward to sort of going part-time with my job and enjoying life a bit more. And unfortunately, on the 22nd of May, 2017, one of my children, my 29-year-old son, Martyn, went to a concert at the arena, Manchester Arena, to watch Ariana Grande. And unfortunately, a suicide bomber exploded a massive bomb and killed Martyn alongside 21 other people. A lot of them children, actually, because it was attended by young females in particular. And there were a few men, parents, and people like Martyn amongst the dead.
Wow. Wow.
So that day, sadly, my day job went because I just feel unable now to work as a psychotherapist. Simply because in my job as a therapist, I needed to always be available emotionally for my clients. And in all honesty, I can't do that now because I think I would not be honest with my clients if part of me would always think, stop complaining, you are still alive. And I wouldn't say that would be fully there, but somewhere in the deepest corners of my brain, that would be there. And the only ethical choice I had really was to quit my job. However, until then, I was so naive about terrorism. I had nothing to do with it. Every time I saw a shooting in America, every time I saw a terrorist attack somewhere elsewhere in America or anywhere else in the world, I'd look at the news and think, oh, look at those poor people. Oh, my goodness, they must be so upset. Anyway, what do you want for tea? And shall we switch over and watch a show? And I didn't want to engage with it because to me, that sort of thing only happened to other people. It happened on the news. It happened in movies. It didn't happen to real people. And next thing I know, we became the news. And that came totally out of the blue. And I realized I know nothing about the topic of people doing that kind of bad stuff. I didn't know because I never engaged in it. And suddenly I became very interested in why people do what they do. And I thought, why would somebody do something so drastic? What's their thinking process? What makes somebody even want to do that and kill themselves in the process? And I needed to understand. In my profession as a therapist, I always used to tell my clients, with any given situation, stand right back, really take a distant position and look from outside in to your situation. And that way you will see what's in the periphery. And that's what I did in that situation. And that made me really curious about studying the subject. And at the grand old age of 59, I started university.
Wow. That's
And
pretty
I'm in
amazing.
my final, well, I'm in my final year. I'm finishing this coming September. So there you go.
Congratulations, by the way. Good luck
Thank
with
you.
it.
And thank you
Now, go
for
ahead.
joining us and sharing that as well, Figen. I mean, that's
Thank
an
you.
incredible travesty that things like that still happen in this day and age, and that and I think a lot of times, people don't think about the reverberations of actions like this. They think,
Mhm.
when they're going into something like this, they're gonna do this act and they're gonna do it for their cause, and they don't realize that here we're, nearly, 2.5, 3 years out from when this
Mhm.
happened, and how it's still affecting, and it'll always affect your family and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yourself, I'm sure, and how
Mhm.
that, uh, it changed your entire life, and it took your son's life, and all these other innocent people that were just there
Mhm.
enjoying the concert. I mean, it shows how quickly life can go from everything being fine into complete and utter devastation.
Yeah.
I think it's your resilience and your strength, even to come on the program and talk about this, and the efforts that you're doing now in counterterrorism. It's incredible. And could you tell us a little bit? I know a little bit about your story, and we're really honored to have you on the program. But there's something in the UK now called Martyn's Law. That can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about that?
Yeah, so obviously when Martyn died, I was spending a lot of time at home grieving and not doing much in the first year at all. And then in the second year, I started venturing out and about a bit. And my husband got some concert tickets for a singer he likes. And it was only in a small theatre in Manchester, not a massive big one, like an arena. And we went, and I took my tiniest handbag with me to make the bag search at the door easier for the security staff, because I made the assumption foolishly that since the Manchester Arena attack, security at venues like theatres and everywhere where there are crowds of people will now be very tight, because lessons will have been learned. And we got there, and our tickets weren't even checked. We could have just walked in without paying or buying tickets.
Wow.
We just walked straight in and straight up to our seats. And I remember during the concert, I was crying, and my husband said, "Are you crying because the song is so sad and it's making you upset?" And I said, "No, I'm crying because there was nobody checking our tickets, and I can't believe things have not improved since the attack. I'm really upset about that." Anyway, we went home, and it was Christmas time, and after Christmas and New Year, I was still heavily chewing on this. I was really not happy. And I decided to set up an online government petition for more security at large venues. And it's then a couple of other people joined in who are quite influential. One of them is his wife was a politician. She got killed by a right-wing extremist 2 years prior to Martyn dying. And and he then introduced me to a very high-ranking police officer who was working in sort of protecting people. And so the three of us came together, and Nick Aldworth, the guy who is the policeman who's since retired and is more devoted to Martyn's Law now because he's not working full-time anymore, he now has written the document Martyn's Law, and with that document we actually went to government and had meetings with the security minister, and I am now still in talks with the government about it. Initially nobody was interested, but once the document was in place and we arranged meetings at the Home Office, they took me serious. And I actually, in a telephone Zoom, the last meeting I had with the security minister was via Zoom because of COVID-19.
Right.
And there were a few of his colleagues there as well. And I said to the minister, "Look, I'm only 5 foot small. I'm not very tall. But I said, but I'm going to be buzzing around you like an irritating fly. I am not going to go away with this. This is important to me." And I think he understood. And anyway, so it's in negotiation with the government at the moment. And there's more meetings going to happen.
That is awesome. That's really, really good.
So it will become a law. It will not be called Martyn's Law. It'll come under the government's, what they have a document called Contest, and it comes under that document, but it will hopefully become a law in its own right.
Yeah,
We
I
hope
hope
so
so.
too. I mean, that just goes to prove too, right there, one dedicated person like the young lady we have on the program tonight. One person can change laws, can get laws going, and get the attention of the government on these important things. And we think it's incredibly important. And you're right. You know, I've noticed it here in the United States too. Sometimes when you go to different events, sometimes the security is good and they have it, and other times you can just kind of waltz on in. And we've had, you know, increased terrorist attacks here, and we've seen it in other parts of the world. And I think, you know, there's the argument where people say, well, you know, we don't want to be checked and things like that. I think sometimes security and looking at these things for the safety, the greater good of the citizenship, I think it's a minor inconvenience is fine, because the greater good, absolutely. You know, we don't want things like this
it's
to ever
interesting.
happen.
Yeah, you know, when I first started talking about it, I'm really active on Twitter, so I got to put it on Twitter, and I got really criticized on Twitter. People are saying you're turning it into a police state. We don't want all this control. Other people said, well, if you put loads of bug searchers and metal detectors there, queues will form outside. There were all sorts of arguments. And then the media didn't help, because there were headlines suddenly in the papers: arena victim's mother wants airport-style security everywhere. That's not at all what Martyn's law is about. It's literally 5 components. Component 1 is that all I'm asking for is that anybody where there are crowds gathering, any staff, or to do the free of charge 45-minute counter-terrorism training, so that they know what to do in a terrorist attack, where to put their customers, where to put themselves, etc. It's very common sense. It's available for the general public here. So all I'm asking is that employers say, do that 45-minute training and evidence you've done it. Point number 2 is that any organization goes around the building and looks at vulnerabilities in terms of a possible terrorist attack. Point number 3 is, if you identify any, deal with them, sort them out. If you need a new back door, put a new back door in. If you need to have a better lock at the front, put a better lock in. If you need more, for bigger venues, if you need more security arrangements, then sort them out. Number 4 is have a terrorism action plan in place, just like a health and safety or fire risk plan that people have to display by law. And the last one would be for bigger venues, so that local authorities work with the venue. So if, for instance, a concert finishes, the councils here, the local authorities, can change the setting of the traffic lights to make the traffic flow quicker, so that people disperse quicker. It's a simple thing like that, you know, and that's all I'm asking for. It's not difficult, it's not costly, it's very proportionate, and that's all I'm after.
Wow.
It sounds absolutely sensible to me. And just like you said, it's not going to be something that's going to, you know, raise cost. It's not that much of an inconvenience. And, you know, just from personal experience, going to a concert, there's a concert venue in downtown Detroit, and they had 4, 5, 6 metal detectors as you come in. It was not jamming up. You know, it doesn't have to be a full body search or something, but just, you know, a general, you know, through the gates. And it's not that big of an inconvenience to save lives. It really isn't. And so what you're doing is incredible.
And I was criticized for it being costly, so I went and bought handheld metal detectors, and they cost me £22 each, so they're not expensive.
Right.
So if people tell me they can't afford security, I'll give them that as a gift.
Exactly.
You know?
I think a lot of times, you know, and I understand in a certain aspect, like people are like, especially with like the mainstream media, a lot of times, you know, because it grabs people's attention and it might be their opinion, and because they don't get to understand what is really going on, they just think, oh, heightened security, well, then you just want to check everything, you want to limit my rights and everything else. But a lot of what you're describing, you know, the security stuff, at least here in the US, if you're at a big venue, many times the local or maybe the county sheriff's department, depending on where it's at, there's a bigger concert venue a little bit, you know, north of Detroit, but it's one of the bigger ones around the Detroit area that, you know, they have huge concerts, but at the end of the night, you know, they are in cooperation, I think, with the local sheriff's department to make sure everybody is able to get out safely and that the lights, you know, if even if the lights aren't changed, they have them out there directing the traffic. And then, like you said, you know, all you ask is that the people working these things take a free training. It's not going to cost anybody anything extra. And honestly, sadly enough, with the way this world is going right now, it's not out of the question to be ready or prepared. You know, you prepare for the worst case scenario and you hope for the best. But if you're not prepared at all, like you said, I mean, what are you going to do? Like, I think what you're doing is amazing. And, you know, it's also, it's coming from a place of you were personally affected, but it's not just for you. It's for everybody, because you don't want to see anybody else having to go through, any other family having to go through what you've had to go through.
No, because, you know, the situation we are in, I mean, somebody said to me today, hopefully when the court case is finished, you'll have closure. You never get closure on this. You know, I will never get closure. This is now my life, you know. When you lose somebody in those circumstances, that never leaves you. You know. So, but I think it's really important to not wait and hang around with security, because especially during COVID, I mean, I keep an eye on the international terrorism scene pretty much now, because I'm obviously fully engaged in it, in the whole process. And I know that in many different countries, in Europe and overseas, the online radicalization has massively increased, both with Islamist extremism and right-wing extremism, or any extremism really. It's gone really up. And we don't actually, because we've never been in a pandemic, we actually do not know the impact of that once we come out the other end.
Right.
So we may have a whole sea of new terrorists coming out. You know, we do not know.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
A good point. You know, we're seeing a lot of civil unrest and things like that too here, and I think in other parts of the world as well. And I think some of that, you know, probably it's a psychological factor. It's more your line of expertise, Figen, but I think a lot of there's been some studies that are starting to be done about how people, you know, are being kind of kept in or locked in a bit, and it's causing them distress. It's causing people to suffer from depression because they're not as engaged and things like that. So the long-term effects of something like this on different individuals, I think, is potentially opening the door for a lot of really negative things that, as you just said, you know, like that we as a society, as a world community or whatever, we just don't have this, you know, fully understanding of it yet. And, you know, you were talking about, you know, like the 45-minute class and things like that. In the United States, when we had, there was a big deal and a debate over some years ago over getting on airplanes, you know, where they started stepping up security at the airports, and it was to stop terrorists from getting on planes and things like that, because this was an ongoing issue here. And there was a lot of people that were really opposed to it because it was slowing down lines and things. And you put that into perspective, and it's like, your family's entire life has been altered forever because of something like this, that, you know, that may have been able to be avoided if these stipulations and these regulations were in place. How is a minor inconvenience of having to stand in a line worth someone's life? You know, if you look at it from that perspective, you know, like I don't understand how these people can argue. They're not putting it into perspective. They're not putting it into a human perspective. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier about how when you saw these things, like it was just on television, it was a bit of a disconnect because it didn't happen to you. And I think a lot of times there has to be some kind of hurdle where we can get to the public and get them to understand that even though it's not happening to you as an individual, this is something that affects all of us as human beings, you know, that
Yeah.
it's a minor inconvenience, I think is worth it to save lives.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I know people tell me terrorist attacks are very rare, but then that family of people who have been directly affected is growing, you know.
Oh, yeah.
As I said to you earlier, I went and visited people at Christchurch, New Zealand. There are so many young women and older women who have lost their husbands in the mosque, you know, all in one frenzy of shooting. You know, it's so many families have been badly affected in those moments. And our 22 who died, I mean, a lot of them died within, well, as soon as the explosion happened, a lot of people just died instantly. Martyn, I was told, died in a third of a second. I mean, you can't even bear thinking of how fast that is. And in that split second, our life as a family has changed for good, you
Yeah.
know.
That's it's like I can't even imagine having to go through something like that. But I will say, like, one thing that, like, sitting here talking with you, and like I've seen stuff on Twitter and other things, but like it amazes me how in a split second you had your entire life changed, you had your son taken away, but instead of being bitter, and I'm sure you've dealt with that before. Like it's part of, you know, the process. And like you said, you know, you will never fully have closure. You will never have your son back. But you have chosen to do something positive and do something good to help other people versus allowing that tragedy to make you bitter and to close you off. Like maybe you can explain it, maybe you can't, and I don't know if anybody will ever fully be able to understand because like I said, we're not in your shoes. But for you, how what made you decide, instead of allowing it to completely crush you and debilitate you for the rest of your life, to be able to go and talk with, you know, people and, you know, positions of power to make change and everything like that? Like, how does one go from losing everything to being able to think about other people? Like, that's amazing to me.
I can fairly easily explain that because so what happened? The explosion happened in on the 22nd of May. Obviously, as you can imagine, the house filled with relatives, people, police, coroners, counter-terrorism, undertakers. The whole house was like crazy. Lots of people in and out. And eventually, after about nearly 2 weeks, it calmed down. My relatives went back home. Um, there was less media attention, there was less police activity. And one morning, I just found myself on my own at home. Everybody had gone back to school, college, and work. And I bought a newspaper from the shop across the road. And on the front page was a picture. And I didn't understand it because obviously I'd not been watching the television because there was so much going on.
Right.
And when I read it, it was an attack at a mosque in London called Finsbury Mosque. This is less than 3 weeks after the Manchester Arena attack. So this British guy hired a van and was going to kill many Muslims. And he drove to this mosque on a Friday afternoon and wanted to kill people after Friday prayers. He killed one person, injured several. But as he then, I think, rammed the car somewhere and couldn't go any further, and he jumped out of the car and wanted to run away. And of course, the people from the mosque were chasing him and wanted revenge, I
Oh, yeah.
suppose. They were angry. And he fell. And the photo that was on the front page of this newspaper was phenomenal. And it affected me so much because there was this chain of 5 men, one of them the imam, and the other 4 were people who had been at the mosque praying. And they, in all that chaos and confusion and terror, because nobody knew if there's somebody else going to attack them, these 5 men in that split second, in that moment, decided to link arms and protect the man who'd fallen, the terrorist who'd fallen on the floor. And I looked at that photo and I thought, blimey, these people are just amazing. They, in all that chaos, they decided what's humanely the right thing to do. And I thought about it all day. And by the time my husband came home that evening, I said to him, I'm going to ring the BBC tomorrow. I want to go on national TV and forgive the terrorist who killed Martyn.
Wow.
And he said, why would you want to do that? And I explained the photo, and I said, look, it's taught me that story in London has made me realize that actually I have a choice of how to react. Because I hadn't even felt anything until then because I was numb. But that story really had such a huge impact. And sure enough, the morning after I rang the BBC, they couldn't wait to get me on TV because it was a big story.
Right.
And I got slated with trolls on Twitter. You know, people couldn't understand how they called me stupid and deluded and don't know what I'm talking about and it's rubbish. But I stayed true to myself and stayed within my own humanity. And for me, that was really important. And like I said, also, because of the job I had and this thankfully, the ability to stand back and look in, I managed to use that skill as well and thought, okay, I need to understand why terrorism is even a thing, which led me then to study it. But in the meantime, obviously, when you also asked the second part of your question, how do you confront politicians and talk to government? Well, when Martyn died, until that day, I was actually an introvert. I was working from my basement at home, seeing clients privately. And I was quite happy hiding there because I didn't like lots of people around. And when Martyn died, I completely changed and I don't fear crowds. I've even talked at the European Parliament. I don't care whether there are 500 people in front of me or 300 school children in front of me or politicians. I really have lost the ability both to be scared and to be ashamed. So I have nothing to lose.
That's awesome. That is
Wow.
really, really awesome.
That was an incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, that just almost at a loss for words because it just sends a chill, you know, when you hear you to put yourself in that scenario. And I think the trauma and what you've been through as a human being gave you the strength to be able to do what you're doing now. And you know, we think it's absolutely incredible. And you know, the people that are trolling and you know, saying negative things, they can't put themselves in the position that you've been in, and what you're doing is more courageous than any online troll or any critic or anything like that. I mean, you've been there, you've done that. I mean, you're a true, you know, truly it's a warrior outlook on life, and we think it's phenomenal what you're doing, and keep doing it, Figen. Keep doing
Yes.
it.
Oh, yeah.
Please.
Well, like I said to a lady at the government this last week, I had a phone call of the Home Secretary, and I said to her that actually this is now my new job, my new day job, and I'm very passionate about my job.
And that's awesome. And it shows too. It really does show like that, you know, I'm completely blown away. Like it's completely incredible. How, you know, growing up I heard, you know, stories, you know, I grew up fairly religious within the Christian religion, and like, you know, you hear of things about like don't let things make you better, don't, you know, do this, you know, and all that. But until you're really like faced with circumstance and a situation that calls for that, you don't really understand what that takes. And I know with doing the work that we do now with Beyond Barriers and everything, like I have started to have like a completely different understanding. And like you said, a lot of people, when it comes to terrorism and extremism, that happens to other people. It happens on the news. It doesn't happen to us, so
Mm.
on and so forth, until it does happen to you. And then it's like, what do you do now? Um, I know, I think it is absolutely phenomenal, the whole Martyn's Law and trying to get that passed and everything. And I commend you and everybody that you're working with to try and do that, because I know it is not easy trying to make any changes, period. And I know you're probably getting a whole lot of backlash. And like you said, you got trolls on there asking, why in the world would you forgive this person? They took somebody from you. They did a horrendous thing. Um, but still, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal and amazing. Do you like you're over there in the UK, so I know you're more familiar with the different resources over there, and you said that you do talk with schools, you talk with all sorts of people. Like, if there's anything, like if somebody is either, has been affected in the same ways of you, or, might even be on the other end of it, might actually be on the extremism part of it. Like, do you have any suggestions, whether going to your Twitter, maybe getting a code of you there, your website, and I'll definitely link your website in the bio also. Like, do you have any advice or suggestions for anybody that might want to know more information or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously my website contains a lot of information about all the work I do, but in terms of if something like this ever happens to somebody, it's so easy to start hating and letting this destroy your life. And I very early on also, I mean, I was terribly grieving, and people said things to me like, "Oh, you're smiling all the time. You're not looking like a grieving mother." And they don't know I cried myself to sleep most nights.
Exactly.
But I mean, part of why I am always strong on, when I'm giving interviews or when I talk publicly is, first of all, I've had lots of therapy. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the ability to do it. I would have just broken down. But secondly, also, there's a strong part of me that I don't want terrorists who watch me to see that they think they've crushed me. And to me, when you step back and think, what do terrorists want to achieve? They want to cause chaos, they want to cause division, anger, they want to absolutely wreak havoc, and they want revenge for whatever purposes. And they use the general public, because terrorism isn't aimed at you or me, it's aimed at governments, but they're using human beings as pawns in this game. And any one of us could at some point become part of that game, unfortunately. But to me, if anybody ever is affected by a terrorist attack personally, be that through death or severe injury or even psychological damage, becoming bitter is just what they want. And please don't allow that, and always remain within your own humanity, and think outside the box, think of the bigger picture, and ask yourself, why did this happen? Why do people do that? And educate yourself, inform yourself about it when you feel ready. Because for me, it was quite an eye-opener to go and train in counter-terrorism. I've learned so much in the time I've studied, and I have a completely different concept of terrorism now. Don't let bitterness take over. And I personally had to remember that I'm still a wife, I'm still a mother to 4 other children, I'm a grandmother to 5 grandchildren. I need to still function in those roles,
Right.
so giving up was never an option.
Exactly. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And I think what's really important too on what you're saying is it's really, I just want to elaborate or add my thoughts to it, is it's really easy to hate. And that's coming from people that had come, we came out of the far right. It's very easy to do that. And I think back to, some of the similar situations to like what you had been in. And when I was younger, before I understood some of the things I understand now, I always wondered how people could forgive, how, you know, something like that, or even sometimes move on from it, because it's so much easier to just hate, or to be just filled with hate. And you're right, that's what they want. And it's so
Yeah.
much more courageous to take it from just exactly what you said. I just want to echo it, or reiterate it. Looking at it, the big picture, looking at it from the outside looking in, how can we affect, you know, change? How can we make a difference? And by being bitter and angry, it doesn't help it, and it drags you down too. It puts you down
Yeah.
To their level, and it doesn't really solve anything. If anything, it's sort of like some of these ongoing wars that you have, where it's just, you know, well, they did this to me, so now I'm going to do it back. And it's, I think it's way harder to be able, and more courageous actually, to be able to forgive and move forward, and put out positivity and good things, that you know, so we can avoid these things. You know, maybe we can never stop it completely, these type of horrific acts,
No.
but education and understanding, and as you said, finding the humanity in all this is really the solution, I think, as well.
I mean, when I go to schools, I always tell the children, I talk a lot on Twitter as well about tolerance, kindness, compassion, one humankind. And I really make the point to the children when I go to schools, and I say the only race really you need to worry about is one humankind. And if you turn the word humankind back to front, it makes it kind human. And kindness is so important. So I always take a box with me, a gift box in the size of a shoebox. And I always tell the teachers before I arrive at school, give every child a pen and a small card or paper, because I want them to write something down. And before I leave, I always say to them, just write one act of kindness you promise to do, no matter how small, and write that down and put it in the box. And then I have a whole box of kindness and give it to the teachers and say, there you are, you have a whole box of kindness. Do some productive work with these children with this, what's in the box. And to me, I always say to the children, you know, don't fear difference. See it as an enrichment to your own life. Embrace it, you know.
Wow.
And it's about breaking down barriers and not fearing, because a lot of stuff comes from fear, and you know, we need to stop fearing each other as people.
Oh yeah.
And work on. That's really important. And these are the things that I'm trying desperately to promote now. So on my business card, it actually I call myself peace promoter and activist.
That's awesome.
I like that, the kindness story, and then when you were talking about beyond the barriers, right there, that's what we do as well.
So
And beyond barriers,
yeah,
it's really what the concept is. Exactly, you hit it. Yeah.
Well, and I know one thing you mentioned too is like, I think an important part is like to educate children. You have to start at the core level in order to avoid, hopefully, you know, what it can lead to. Because if we don't learn these things when we're younger, it's so much more difficult to try and learn it and incorporate it when we're already older and set in our ways and everything else. So, and I know that's one thing Jeff, you know, tries to hit on a lot. Like when we go and we talk with people, it's like you have to start at the core level. You have to start with the children and teaching them, like you said, that differences aren't to be feared, you know. And a lot of times, and I know Daryl Davis says it too, like a lot of the hatred comes from ignorance and fear, and then it just builds on top of each other. So I think that's incredible. Like you said, you know, the box of kindness, like I think that is awesome. I love little things like that anyway, but it's something that brings it to a more tangible place that you can physically be like, here. It's not just some concept, I guess you could say. So that's really awesome.
When I think too with the school system, and we've been asked this before because we've met with educators and we've done some work with that as well, you know, policymakers and things like that. And I want to have a more even concise program for that, because a lot of times I know when we were in the far right, when we would hear about programs for diversity and things like that. We say, oh, those are indoctrination courses and they're being forced and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if you get outside that box and look from the outside looking in, we're not talking about indoctrinating anybody or forcing these ideas on anybody. It's like simply learning about these other cultures and other, it takes away that fear concept. And you don't see it when you're involved in these things, when you're involved in extremism, far right, Islamism, whatever. And I mean, extreme Islamism, but when you're involved in these things, you don't see it that way. To this day, I don't like the word fear, but honestly, that's what it is. It's fear of not knowing. It's not understanding. It's not having that concept. So if they could just learn, it's not about indoctrination. It's about just understanding. And it's like the differences we have as human beings are so minuscule that it's not worth killing somebody over. It's not worth, so what if this person worships Allah and this person worships Jesus, or this person worships Odin or Buddha or whoever, like that, what does that matter? Like we're all human beings. We all live on this planet. We should be concerned about sustaining the planet and for future generations, and that's something everybody should care about. So
yeah, absolutely. And sadly, terrorism isn't just about religion, is it? It's about lots of other things. Unfortunately, sometimes it's hidden under the banner of religion, but it hasn't got anything to do with it.
Exactly.
And it's a shame, but like you said, I think a lot of it is ignorance and fear of difference. And if only we could stop doing that as a society. But you're quite right. I think at an early age, that's when it has to change, that mindset,
Absolutely. Yeah. If we can catch it early enough, then it becomes a lot more minimal, I guess you could say. It's always an issue. And it's been around for centuries. Unfortunately, now we're at an age where everybody across the globe is so much more connected. And I think we're realizing these things more now than ever, because in the age of electronics that we live in, like, hey, we can talk to each other across the globe on Zoom, and it's like we're here in the same room. So I think there is a lot of learning. Like I think it's fascinating, if you could use that word, but that not only did you decide to try and turn this into something to help other people, which also helps you in your own process, but you turned it in to help other people, but not just those closest to you. You turned it in so that way everybody and all of humanity can hopefully learn from it. And you decided to learn, why are these things happening? What makes a person tick? Part of that, I think, is the whole psychology and being a therapist and everything like that. But also it's just, what makes these people do this? Because it's not just a split second that people go and decide that they want to kill themselves and a whole bunch of other people. And I think you also hit the nail on the head. Many times this is an attack against governments, but they do use the common people, and they use people as a means to an end and as a pawn. And, to be able to understand that and to be able to hopefully set things in place to prevent that, but also recognizing the humanity in others, whether or not they recognize it or not, is huge.
Yeah. Absolutely.
From the terrorist perspective too, like I don't quite understand it, why under any circumstances, if they feel they're at war with the government, and maybe you have some insight on this, but Figen, but they feel like they're at war with the government, as was discussed. Why are they targeting civilians?
Well, I think certainly with the Manchester Arena attack, I think it's Daesh is obviously hiding under the banner of religion, and attacking other people who display a Western culture which is sort of unacceptable in their mindset, and by killing themselves, they think they go to some amazing place where they have wonderful things waiting for them, but actually that is just a belief, isn't it? It's a foolish belief. It's a very destructive belief. But you know, if you're indoctrinated to that point, you believe it.
It's a good point.
Simple as that. You know, it's when you twist something that is has a totally different meaning, and you twist it to the point where you persuade somebody that if you don't do that, you're not doing your religion. You must do that because this is your duty. And to be a good religious person, you have to do that. And if somebody believes that, what can you do with that? You know, so it's really, indoctrination is really powerful.
Absolutely.
We really want to thank you for coming on the program. If there's anything that you'd like to say in summary, or and put out your website, you know, we're going to do that as well. But thank you so much for coming on the program. It's been an incredible honor for us, and you have courage that shines brighter than the Vegas lights at night. Really appreciate what you're doing out there, Figen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
And I appreciate that you had me on the show.
Thank you for coming on.
Nice to meet you both.
You too. Thank you.